Hello and welcome to Just a Thought, our Saturday discussion between the Reverend Cindy Lippert, who's all the way out in New Mexico, and myself, Durrell Watkins, the Senior Minister of the Sunshine Cathedral, here in a COVID hotspot and hurricane destination. So I never thought I'd be jealous of New Mexico. I've never been a desert person, but I could become one this weekend.
If you check our weather bug here, it says closest hurricane 2,000 miles. So I guess we're okay.
Exactly. It's always something, right? You pick where you live. If you wanted to live in the Midwest, you'd have tornadoes, and if you wanted to live in the Northeast, you'd have blizzards, and if you lived in California, you'd have earthquakes. So, you pick where you live.
Yeah.
What do you want to face?
Yeah.
So, okay, here's how this works, is that we discuss a thought, somebody else's thought gets us going, and then it leads into our thoughts, and we forget all about the person who got us rolling to begin with. And this week's thought comes from Rabbi Morris Lichtenstein, and I'm a big fan of his. I'm maybe the only person who knows about him. He was, he and his wife, actually he's from Lithuania, and he came to the United States, and he was the first, I believe the first European to attend the Hebrew Union College, which is who ordained him as a rabbi. And he was a rabbi in the, in the early 1900s. And he was concerned that a lot of Jewish people were converting to Christian Science. They were converting to Christian Science because of the healing message and the hope around, and remember, really, really good effective medicine is pretty new. And so if there were non-invasive, non-toxic ways to improve your health, that was very popular for a while. And Christian Science just grew like wildfire, and then New Thought groups following them. And so he understood why people were following this healing this healing movement, but also he was concerned that people were leaving Judaism, and he also was afraid that some of what Christians understood about Jewish tradition and Jewish scriptures weren't accurate. That there was a lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of anti-Jewish bias in Christian teaching, especially in the day, in that time. And so he wanted to point out that healing was also part of the Jewish tradition. And he focused a lot on the Psalms that use affirmations throughout. And so he developed his own Jewish science. He and his wife, they started the Society for Jewish Science in 1921 in New York City. And he wrote books. And then after he died, his wife continued to lead the synagogue, even though she wasn't a rabbi. She was the first woman to have a Jewish pulpit in the United States. And she was a layperson at that. So he's just a fascinating figure to me. His methodology for healing was, he believed that silent prayer was best, and you did it by means of visualization. You visualized, but it was always very theological. Like you visualized, you imagined some healing stream coming into your body, or you imagined an end result, or you imagined just being happy and joyful and doing all the things you wanted to do. You would have this mental picture. But he said sometimes your pain can distract you, and so it's hard to hold a picture. So that's when he said affirmations were good. So if you can't do the visualization, then use the affirmations. You do them over and over for several minutes. And then gratitude. He thought gratitude was a big important part of a healing process. So visualization, affirmation, and gratitude. And then he would tell stories from the Hebrew scriptures about healing, and he would use the Psalms as affirmation. So he's just a fascinating character. I like him very much. And so he gives us our thought today. He says, and this is from a book he read in 1925, Jewish Science and Health. Very similar to another book, but he writes, God's dwelling place is in the whole of the universe, W-H-O-L-E. God's dwelling place is in the whole of the universe and the heart of all things. God is the vitalizing force, the principle of all that exists, and all forms of reality are but manifestations of God's reality. There is no life, there is no particle even of existence that is not infused with the divine presence. He actually wrote impregnated. I changed that to infused because 1925, 2020, different, we speak a little differently. But he often, and more than anything else, referred to God as divine mind, and really rejected anthropomorphic images of the divine mind, saying that it was omnipresent and we're all part of it. So let me read, there's a little lengthy quote, let me read it again. God's dwelling place is in the whole of the universe, in the heart of all things. God is the vitalizing force, the principle of all that exists, and all forms of reality are but manifestations of God's reality. There is no life, there is no particle even of existence that is not infused with the divine presence. What do you think about that, Cindy Lippert?
Those that preach that God is everywhere and completely accessible tend to cut that off in areas they don't agree with. That God apparently is not in queer people. God apparently is not in whatever political persuasion you're not at the time. Mm-hmm. God is not in anybody you disagree with, period. So we either believe in omnipresence or we don't. We either believe that God is not an anthropomorphic figure sitting on a cloud somewhere trying to decide if you're naughty or nice, practicing managing the world by whim with bipolar schizophrenic mindlessness with no plan. It's like somebody asked, when is God gonna stop this COVID thing? Where's God? When is God coming to rescue us from this pandemic? And for those that believe that God is going to show up and just scoop us all up, and those that don't believe get left, right? This is probably very disappointing. But what it does is it opens up the possibility, gee, maybe God is bigger than us and bigger than the universe and the multiverse and the thing that caused the Big Bang in the first place, that it's something that we can't comprehend other than it is our heartbeat and our lungs that breathe. And that is no respecter of persons, meaning that all of us are equally made in varieties. And if we can embrace that idea, that would be revolutionary, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. And it's, and I get it because we're so focused on circumstances and situations and experiences. And so we have this almost childlike belief sometimes that when it's going my way, God is doling it, making it rain, the money, just making everything work out for me. And when it's not working my way, when things are going to be working against me, either God is absent, or God is angry with me, or God is testing me, or God is teaching me something, or God is punishing me, or some other force is attacking me and God is allowing it, or God's going to beat down that force eventually and I just have to have faith and wait. Just saying that is exhausting to me. Saying those things have just worn me out. I need iced tea now to refresh. That is just exhausting. And yet people live their whole life. That was my early childhood. That was my teenage years. Me negotiating and trying to find loopholes with this God who loved me enough to offer me a special place in the sky after I die, but only if, I did this, that, and the other thing. It's almost like being loved by a mob boss godfather, that it's all good until you cross a line or break a rule or embarrass him or something. And so it was so freeing. And I understand some people just walk away from religion. They just that God thing, it doesn't make sense. I'm done with it. I get it. But it was so freeing to me to understand that there's a third option. I don't have to embrace this capricious and tribal and vengeful and unstable God, and I don't have to just ditch God altogether. I can explore God in new ways. I can understand God in new ways. I can experience God in new ways. And that was super, super freeing and healing for me. And so I'm really, really committed to offering that to people. Yeah, walking away is always an option. And staying put, I guess, is always an option. It wasn't for me. But I want you to know there's also a third option. And that's what people like us are offering people if they want to explore that.
Well, can you imagine trying to explain to a space alien which religion is correct? Which rules, and this is why you find a lot of people in mainstream religion that get caught up and they can't believe in science or the possibility that there are other sentient beings in other locales of the universe, because that would mess up their theology. Well, here's my thought. If anything can mess up your theology, it's pretty faulty theology.
Right. Bishop Spong used to say, and he said he got this from a mentor of his, but he used to say, any God that can be killed ought to be killed as a public service.
That's right. If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then I think it was Rabbi Kushner who said that the religious life is just a long journey of destroying one idol after another. That once you think you've found your God, and it's certainly bigger than the last God you had, you found it. Okay, now I'm there. Okay, once you're super comfortable with that, it's time to take a sledgehammer to that because it's an idol. And then you get rid of that and you find a bigger God, only to realize that that's become an idol. And you take a sledgehammer to that and you find a bigger God until that becomes an idol. And so it's this ongoing journey into this mystery. And it's so much more life-giving, I think, than how can I follow the rules to not get on the bad side of this abusive parent God.
Yeah. Well, isn't it the Hindus, Durrell, that once a year go to the sea and destroy all of their idols for the year?
That sounds good.
Yeah, that was in Houston Smith's great documentary on the religions of the world. And then, of course, they go back and create new ones. And this is symbolic that they know that God is not in those statues and things like that. That, it's a reminder that those idols are just a reminder, not the totality of the God they're worshiping.
There's the Zen saying, you point at the moon, but your finger's not the moon.
Right.
And so our symbols, the Eucharist, the Bible, the cross, whatever, the creeds, the altar, the pulpit, our symbols are pointing us in a direction. Once we get fixated on the symbol, it becomes an idol and it's in the way. Your finger's not the moon.
You just reminded me. You just reminded me. We used to have cats, and you point your finger at a cat, he'll look at the finger. He will go. He's looking at your finger.
Yeah, he'll come and sniff it.
Yep. Yeah. What's that? But the freedom and finding our freedom, and that's what we're all trying to do, is find our freedom to be free to be me. And that's how you live a joy-filled life. That's how you walk each other home. That's how you encourage each other to be fully alive with your one beautiful life that we know about. Yeah.
We get this quite a bit. Critics, and we're out there, we're out in the world. So I guess they're invited to let us know what they think about us. But one of the criticisms we get is, and this is a funny criticism to me. One of the criticisms we get is that we say God is love. And that really annoys people. Not everybody. I mean, some people think, oh, thank God. I love hearing that. But there's a whole faction of strangely religious people who are really annoyed by the love message. They will say, yes, God is love, but. And then they say horrible, frightening, terrible things, which resemble nothing like love. But so they'll say, yes, God is love, but God is also a consuming fire who will, will not tolerate it in, lack of righteousness or sinfulness, whatever. And so somehow they find some sort of comfort or some sort of crutch in believing that God is really, really angry.
Yeah.
Loves us enough that if we hate ourselves enough, God will give us a pass. And, I'm just like, wait a minute, none of this is interesting to me. None of this is appealing to me. What you're offering me it isn't much better than the alternative you're threatening me with. I don't understand why that is appealing to people. And even if it is, I don't understand why that if we don't buy that, that's somehow a threat. People really come for us. They desperately need us to know that God's angry with us. And they're really, really annoyed that we're not going to buy what they're selling.
That's right. It's
but
true.
It's not possible. If God is love and God is omnipresent, then that whole other narrative just doesn't make a lick of sense.
Well, how does that look in the world? How does that work in the world? You see people that are terrified they're not going to go to heaven, and they are terrified and they live fearful lives. I've seen it over and over again. Now, there's a lot of people that are going to say, that's not true. I know so-and-so, and he's very happy. Well, good. That's great. Because I think, personally, as many different ones as there are of us on the planet, I think that's how many different ways we see God. Yes. And if a punishing, punitive God is what makes you get up in the morning and makes your life abundant and whole, hang on to that God. Hang on to that God.
I will offer this this buyer beware, this caveat emptor statement though. Emerson reminds us, be careful what you're worshiping. You will worship something, but be careful what you're worshiping, because what you're worshiping, you are becoming.
Yes.
And so, yeah, have a nasty God. You are entitled to a nasty God, but then don't delude yourself into believing that you are a kind and generous person, because you'll never be better than your God.
Yeah. Well,
and so if I have a loving God, I may not measure up to that yet, but at least I have this goal that I'm working toward. If I have an angry, petty God, that's the goal. Now, maybe I'm not that nasty yet, but that's what I'm trying to get to. If that's my God, our God is what we're trying to get to. And so I'm not trying to get to the send people to hell forever, send plagues and diseases, reject people for their opinions and their membership in clubs and cults. And none of that seems like love to me. And none of that appeals to me. None of that is God enough for me.
Well, as an actor, I'm worshiping Meryl Streep.
I'm a little disappointed that it's not Dame Judi Dench, but
well, Judy's losing her eyesight. I got to go with a younger one these days.
Oh no! Oh no!
No offense, Judy. I love you, but
Oh my gosh!
Gotta move on.
Wow. When I say Grace, Judy's who's listening, I think. But
yeah, probably. No, I love Judi Dench. I love Meryl Streep. I love Helen Mirren. I love all the women my age that have been in it to win it their whole entire lives. I started late, so I got a lot of catching up to do.
And we kid world, we kid internet, we kid interweb. We laugh, we play, we joke, because when you're part of God and God is love, God gets to be fun. God gets to be joyful. We have absolutely no fear that kidding around about, and we're only half kidding anyway.
Right.
Because if God is omnipresent, then Judi Dench is 100% part of God.
Absolutely.
And we are seeing something of God in her. And I think that's the whole Jesus message. That Jesus is this incarnate word. He's the divine incarnated in human experience, to show us that is true for all of us.
Yeah.
That is, if God is omnipresent, that has to be true for all of us.
It has to be.
Well, Jesus, he said, for Christians, is the example, is showing us what that looks like.
Yeah. I like Jesus as the great example rather than the great exception. It works better for humanity. And when he said, the things I've done, you can do this and more. You can do this and better. He never said, I'm the only one. Never.
Right.
And, for true Bible scholars, the language, as it gets to the root, you understand better about the parables and metaphors and the way they taught them. And Jesus would be appalled today if he knew we were trying to take language from 14th, 15th century King James and take it literally today.
Yeah. So
yeah, it makes no sense.
James, the King James Version was 1611, and of course he didn't do it. He had scholars, he had monks do it. He didn't do it, but he did put his name on it. And just for the people who like that version of the Bible to beat up LGBTQ plus people with, Sister James was big old Queen. King James was Queen James, and would not have signed anything that he thought was condemning him. Just P.S.
Right.
Well, all right. So yeah, this whole idea, we keep coming back to always serve as chicken. We keep coming that God is omnipresent. God is the one presence, the one reality, the one substance. That God is love, God is good, God is goodness, and God is the source and substance of all that is. So we're part of that, which means no matter what our experience is, not even our own experience of ourselves, maybe we feel broken and damaged and acting out, not behaving at our best. That is all experience.
Yeah.
That is not the essential us. The essential real us is part of a creation that God has called very good. And it has to be good because it's part of God. Because if God is omnipresent, then there's only one presence, everywhere fully and evenly present, and we have to be part of it. And the mystics and the teachers, and they keep bringing us back to it. And I love finding this message in tradition after tradition after tradition. So let's end like we started with Rabbi Morris Lichtenstein. Look him up, folks. He's great. I love him. I do love him. God's dwelling place is in the whole of the universe, in the heart of all things. Somebody out there say all. God is the vitalizing force, the life principle of all that exists. And all forms of reality are but manifestations of God's reality. There is no life, there is no particle even of existence that is not infused with divine presence. I love everything about it. It's just a thought, but I think it's a really good one. Do you have a last word for us, Cindy?
No.
Oh. Purple. My last word is purple. Well, very good. We'll do it again next Saturday. Thank you, everyone. God bless you. If you're facing a storm, be careful. And wherever you are, wash your hands, wear a mask. Bye-bye.